As someone who's covered Snyder and Gunn's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead multiple times on my channel, and as someone who took a truly contrarian position when comparing the remake to the original, I've been repeatedly exposed to one claim which never really made all that much sense to me, being that the original film's cast of characters were noticeably more competent than the 2004 adaptation's characters. And this claim honestly gave me the idea to conduct the following thought experiment. What if the Monroeville gang and the Milwaukee crew switched places? Could the 1978 team fare better than the 2004 cast? Could the Milwaukee crew survive longer than the OG cast in the Monroeville Mall? Now, here's a quick disclaimer. This is not going to be a traditional what if, but rather more so of a comparison. A comparison that must be made in order to find a solid conclusion to the question at hand. This is the case because both movie plot lines are vastly different. Hence, simply inserting each group at the beginning of each film makes it unlikely that these groups would actually form as they did in their respective films. That being said, I think we'll have a definitive answer as to which party is truly the most competent by the end of this video. But before we delve into this intriguing comparison, allow me to ask you for a very quick favor. Apparently, most of you enjoying my content aren't actually subscribed, and this very fact literally makes me cry myself to sleep every night. So if you enjoy this sort of content, please consider smashing that subscribe button. It's 100% free, and it truly does help the channel, which in turn allows me to continue entertaining you. Now with that shameless plug out of the way, let's get the ball rolling on this interesting thought experiment. The Monroeville gang is surprisingly strong for its size, given that it's comprised of 2 SWAT team operators, a helicopter pilot, and one fairly useless woman who eventually learns to both fire a gun accurately and also to fly a news copter. The original cast comes equipped with 2 Alder Jaeger AP-74 rifles, a Model 983 bolt action rifle, and a few revolvers that I honestly didn't care to look up. The team also technically begins the story with a helicopter. Now, setting that information aside, the Monroeville gang does suffer from half of their team being fairly useless in combat. Stephen Andrews can't shoot for shit, and it takes him weeks to get good, while Francine is basically in the same boat as Steve. Francine is also pregnant, although she wasn't as far along as Luda was in the remake, so she's still able-bodied for quite some time. The OG team also suffers from some inherent psychological weaknesses, as Flyboy is an insecure man who succumbs to his materialistic tendencies.
It's ours. We took it. It's ours.
And Roger DeMarco, despite being a competent SWAT team operator, ultimately dies as a direct result of his overconfidence and ego.
Roger always felt that he was able to succeed no matter what the odds, no matter what the obstacles are, and that's what he prided himself on, which was also his tragic flaw.
Yup, it wasn't PTSD or a death wish or whatever the Romero fans want to believe. The dude legit died because of human error. Hell, half the team dies due to human error. But at least the Monroeville gang has Peter Washington, who I can confidently say is the best survivor out of both films. The dude has SWAT level training and just the right mindset and instincts for post-apocalyptic survival. The Milwaukee crew, on the other hand, has 3 different rosters before the climactic mall escape sequence. The starter team is comprised of Anna, Kenneth, Michael, Andre, and Luda. Anna is a tough nurse who had more fight in her than Francine did at the beginning of their character arcs. Kenneth is a badass cop with a shotgun. Michael is a fairly sociable and intelligent guy who proved capable of killing super sprinters with melee weapons. Andre seemed to be a hood rat with decent aim and a handgun, and Luda was just a useless pregnant lady. Off the bat, the starter group is inferior to the original cast due to their lack of weaponry and due to the fact that 1 cop isn't going to be better than 2 SWAT operators. The remake's starting roster does have less liabilities though, as without a helicopter, Steven is fairly useless and we all know Francine isn't doing shit early on. Whereas the only real weak member of the starting roster for the Milwaukee crew is Luda. Nevertheless, the remake's roster expands fairly quickly when the starter group encounters CJ, Bart, and Terry. These dudes all have handguns and they're led by CJ, who's pretty tough and also showcases sharp survival instincts. Now in terms of quality, the Monroeville gang still edges out the Milwaukee crew, but the remake's numerical superiority and lack of potentially debilitating short-term liabilities makes this a very close competition. And once we add the box truck group to the Milwaukee crew, we now have a situation where quantity outperforms quality. At the very height of the Milwaukee crew's strength, There were approximately 14 members and one cute doggo named Chips. But this expanded roster does come with its own weaknesses and liabilities, primarily being Steve the prick, Nicole the emotional moron, and Glenn the useless gay dude who accidentally killed the useless hot chick. I would say Andre is a liability, but that was only ever really the case because Luda got infected. Had she never been infected, Andre would have never lost his mind and killed Norma. Be that as it may, I'd say the Milwaukee crew benefits from having a larger roster at its peak strength, whereas the Monroeville gang benefits from having 2 SWAT operators, one being the best survivor out of both teams, and the OG cast also benefits from better starting weaponry and equipment. Since we're plucking both the Milwaukee crew and the Monroeville gang out of their respective universes and then swapping them, we must obviously compare the primary threat each team will have to contend with, being the Undead. And it is in this direct comparison that we will begin to see just how easy the Monroeville gang had it, which honestly inflates the perception of their competency to heights that are frankly undeserving, with the obvious exception being Peter Washington. That being said, let's begin by quickly covering Romero's Undead as seen in the original film. These slow shamblers are noticeably slower than the Walking Dead zombies, including those after Season 2. These undead freaks have poor motor skills, they are not numerous in quantity, they were casually manhandled by Roger and Peter with suboptimal striking techniques, they're literally scared of open flames, as seen when Francine held one back with a fucking flare. They had pies thrown in their face. They had their wallets and jewelry stolen in broad daylight. We saw rednecks throw a tailgating party while using the undead as a shooting gallery in an open field. We know these Zeds can't climb serious obstacles. They can't shatter windshields. They literally struggled to get past thin wallpaper. They're almost as bad as the Shaun of the Dead zombies with regards to grabbing or grappling people. I mean, just look at how the zombies failed to bite or rip apart Roger in the department store during a tussle on the ground, or how a zombie failed to bite or rip apart Flyboy on the ground at the municipal airport. Crazily enough, both Roger and Steven had their backs exposed during their wrestling sessions with the undead, which is something you never want to do in grappling, and they still didn't get bit or lacerated. If these were the Snyder super sprinters, Roger and Steven would have likely been bitten or lacerated. I will say, however, that the Romero zombies do have 2 advantages over Snyder's undead, being their short-term memory, like when the zombified Steven led a small horde to the hidden stairwell, and also the fact that the Romero undead are like the Walking Dead's wildfire virus, as in no matter how you die, so long as your brain is intact, you'll come back. But these advantages don't really make up for the countless shortcomings of Romero's pitifully slow shamblers. Long story short, Romero's undead just aren't a credible threat so long as you don't remain complacent. Oh, and these kid zombies? Definitely the most dangerous in the original film. Now I want you to compare all of that information to the undead super sprinters of the Snyder remake, which all need headshots in order to kill and which were all running like fresh athletes even after a month of standing outside exposed to the elements. These fucks are also durable enough to survive propane tank explosions if they're not at the epicenter of the blast. They can tank Molotov cocktails, thus requiring extreme heat to truly cook their brains. They can climb far better than the Romero zombies. They can shatter car windshields with ease. They're smart enough to hold open doors for other zombies. Smart enough to pick up a thrown propane tank and then attempt to throw it back. They're attracted to noise but will ignore it if they can determine it isn't worth the pursuit or if it isn't human, as seen with the helicopter. They're smart enough to take guns out of your hands. They're definitely not afraid of fire. They're far more numerous as a horde. They are hinted to be acting on instinct or memory. They certainly can grapple, as seen when a zombie tried to choke out Michael. Like guys, these hellspawn demons are easily far more threatening than the slow shamblers of the original film. And I honestly don't see how anyone can say, in good faith, that the OG crew could somehow clear the Monroeville Mall had these zombies been in the 1978 film. The SWAT team at the beginning of the original movie would have been slaughtered by these sprinters. There wouldn't be a tailgating party by the hillside. It'd be a real fight for survival. Suffice it to say, one group had it much harder with regards to the undead, and it sure as hell wasn't the original team. Now, we obviously can't come to a conclusion as to how each group would perform if their positions were swapped without talking about the 2 iconic malls featured in these classic zombie films. As such, let's begin this segment by breaking down the Monroeville Mall. This legendary mall was teeming with the undead, but was also teeming with civil defense non-perishable food crates, a hardware store, and a hunting goods store brimming with firearms. The undead could not get in aside from using the exterior doors, even prior to the mall's entrances being barricaded with trucks by the original cast. The power somehow never went out, despite the gang being there for what had to have been at least a month. And this mall also had a safe area that was easily defendable and concealable. The Crossroads Mall, on the other hand, was mostly secure at the onset of the zombie outbreak. Its shatterproof glass doors and panels kept the undead at bay somehow. But there was no hunting goods store, no extensive civil defense food stockpile, no farming goods store, or no hardware store. The only gun shop in sight was down the street. The power generator had issues after nearly a month. But there was a garage with welding supplies, a fuel depot, and 2 shuttle buses, although said garage was teeming with sprinters. The mall also had access to the sewer system, but this is basically a one-use method of travel, as the undead can easily fill this subterranean tunnel system as they did in the movie. One could say that the Crossroads Mall also had the downside of being in the north, thus being susceptible to the brutal North American winter. But the Monroeville Mall was also in the north, so it too would have this same complication in the long run. All in all, the Monroeville Mall is clearly the superior mall, meaning the original crew had it easy in that regard as well. So this little segment here is more of a Milwaukee crew exclusive, as they'll have to contend with the biker gang that the Monroeville gang had to confront. The biker gang successfully compromised the safety of the mall in the original film and would absolutely pose a serious threat to the Milwaukee crew as well. But with access to plenty of firearms from the hunting goods store, and with the numerical advantage the Milwaukee crew has over the Monroeville gang, it's actually possible that the final roster of the Milwaukee crew could push back the bikers with a properly executed defense. Remember, at the height of their strength, the remake's peak roster had 14 characters, not including Andy, who was never really a member of the Milwaukee crew because he, could never make it over to the mall. So if anything, Andy will be helping out the Monroeville gang in this scenario. That being said, I don't think the Milwaukee crew can prevent the bikers from ultimately compromising the safety of the mall. And obviously, the Crossroads Mall did not have any issues with a biker gang, precisely because said biker gang likely would have died before they ever reached the mall. Alright, we're finally here. Let's see how each team fares when thrown into their counterparts' respective universes. And we're going to start off with the OG team themselves. Now, allow me to be brutally honest here. The Monroeville gang wouldn't likely even make it to the Crossroads Mall. Francine and Steven's news station would probably get overrun by the undead. Or they'd probably die when the undead break into their homes early in the morning. Peter and Roger would certainly die against Snyder's super sprinters during a SWAT response operation. But ignoring this dark reality, I can see the Monroeville gang doing well at the Crossroads Mall until they make the decision to check up on the backup generator. Here, Peter and Roger just get overrun. It's that simple. Even with Flyboy's help, they get cooked. And if Francine joins the fray, they all get squad wiped. Without a helicopter, they'd never successfully mount an escape from the mall either, which would eventually need to happen. I actually have a video on it. Now, with a helicopter, they'd at least be able to escape. Although to where, I really don't have any clue. The chopper can't carry enough supplies to make them self-sufficient in the wilderness, and the islands on Lake Michigan just wouldn't be safe. I also don't see how the Monroeville gang actually saves Andy, at least without the helicopter. Now, with the helicopter, they certainly could get Andy to join them, thus bringing a few bags filled with guns and ammunition to the mall. But overall, I don't see how this keeps them alive indefinitely. Despite being the most competent character in both films, Peter just can't carry his team to victory here. The mall isn't great, the undead are too much of a threat, and the bag Peter has to carry on his back is just too fucking heavy. Now, I can see the starting Milwaukee group safely arriving at the Monroeville Mall. I can see the core group being able to clear the mall with ease as well, and I can even see them repelling the biker gang, which didn't want to take the mall but rather raid the mall. That being said, I don't really see how they can prevent the mall's defenses from being compromised by the biker gang. Hence, they'd eventually lose the mall at the hands of the undead. I also don't believe Luda would survive childbirth, but at least it wouldn't be a stupid zombie baby. And without a helicopter, I have no idea where they would go at night, when the mall inevitably falls due to the biker gang. I mean, maybe they could take a car. Either way, they'd be leaving with very few supplies in hand, and heading out into the unknown, where the undead and violently desperate survivors would be real threats to their safety. Oh, and I do think the Milwaukee crew would be able to reinforce the defenses of the mall. I just don't think they'd utilize trucks like the original cast did. They've got a hardware store, and they've showcased the ability to reinforce buses, so odds are they'd likely just barricade the mall's entry and exit points with various supplies and pieces of furniture, wood, and metal. Overall, the Milwaukee crew fares better than the Monroeville gang, whereas the OG crew doesn't even survive until the end of the 2004 film. Hell, they likely die before the story even starts. It's pretty easy to seem competent when there's a lack of adversity, and as such, the original film's cast seems better to many because they were surviving on easy mode, whereas the Milwaukee crew seems less competent than they actually are, due to the fact that they were playing on one of the hardest difficulty settings imaginable. Nevertheless, both teams face similar fates. The cast was virtually destined to die in the remake, and the original cast was always going to lose them all. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell as well, that way you may be notified when I publish a new video. And also remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined down in the comment section. I'm Captain Gold, and I hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.